welcome you all to Trek Wars. Imagine yourself after the aftermath of the Dominion War. Millions of people dead, planets devastated, stations destroyed, thousands of ships gone. What do you do after this aftermath? What would you do to repair the Federation? This is the hypothetical question I have for you today. So right off the bat, we know that the logistics of running Starfleet have got to be enormous, with thousands of planets, hundreds of systems, and now we have lost thousands upon thousands of ships with millions of lives. Okay, so the first thing we need to talk about is obviously the logistics that are left over after the war. So all our starships, like the New Orleans, those what we refer to as the golden era Star Trek ships, the ships that we see during the original TNG episodes with Captain Picard, they're dead. They were all destroyed in the beginning phases of the war, right? And then what was left over? Well, they were mothballing and pulling ships from shipyards. They were pulling ships from shipping yards. Anything they do could get any kind of ships. The only ships that had survived the Dominion War were some of the big, large capital class starships like the Galaxy classes and the Nebulas. And then most of the fleet was actually constructed of Excelsiors, Mirandas, and older generation ships that had survived. And you had our new generations like Norway, Defiant, Akiras, and things of that nature were intermittently spread out into groups because they had taken a massive amount of losses during the beginning phases of the Dominion War. Okay, so in my opinion, the first thing that we would need to think about is we need to get logistics up and running, and we need to get a ship that we can replace our logistics situation. So we need ships that are going to bring supplies to, far colonies, to internal planets and stuff in the Federation. Our logistics is the number one thing that we need to fix because we don't need more people dying and more people starving because they're not getting what they need. So with that being said, there are three possibilities that I think of that would make good choices for this logistics change. So there's three candidates for this. Obviously, the Excelsior will be a prime candidate because it's a well-known ship. It's relatively large. It's got good defense. It's got good offenses. And it's a known ship we can produce pretty quickly. Now, the other one would be the Freedom class, which is a new variant of a cruiser, a light cruiser. It's a budget starship. Now, the main reason why I would even consider the Freedom is because it is a budget starship. Though it's not great in all categories, it's easy to produce. It's a one-nacelle starship. It has decent offensive capabilities. It has decent defensive capabilities. And it's relatively large, and it's cheap. So if we need something as a budget ship, this would be the way to go. Now, the other choice that we can do is to go more expensive and go with the Sabre class. It's probably the cheapest of the new generation starships, and it's like a blend between new and old technology. So it's not as expensive as, let's say, like the Norway or Kira or things of that nature, but it's got enough offensive and defensive capabilities where most ships would not want to engage this ship, especially pirates. Okay, so first off, I'm going to reject the Excelsior just because it's too old. It doesn't do very well. It takes a lot of time to take a ship like this and then modernize it. Way too much effort, way too much time. Now I'm going to reject the Freedom class because it doesn't perform very well at warp speeds. And so what I mean by that is this ship doesn't have a very good cruising speed because it's a one-nacelle ship. Though it is cheap to produce, the other factor that really limits it is it has very poor sensors. It has a very small navigational deflector dish that's located right underneath the actual warp nacelle. And then the other thing is I cannot find a reason why I would be wasting a Galaxy class warp nacelle on such a underperforming starship. So with that being said, the Sabre is going to take it. And the main reason the Sabre is going to take it is for this reason alone. It has an incredibly powerful and robust navigational deflector disc. So the reason why that's so important is this navigational deflector dish is capable of reading multiple ships at once. So if we're ever in a situation where we have to deal with enemy ships like the Jem'Hadar fighter or something similar to that, this ship can target multiple ships at the same time and would be a great asset. So if I have to interrupt my convoys and they have to come into a combat situation, I would like for my convoys to be able to defend themselves. And then on top of that, a ship being as powerful as this would be something that raiders or other ships are going to think twice about dealing with. So my first thing is to deal with the logistics situation. So the reason I would be doing this is I think this ship should take the place of all my old generation light cruisers. So, we're talking about the Centaurs, the Constellation, Constitutions, Oberth, Mirandas. All these things are going to be decommissioned. And every single time one of these ships is decommissioned, the crew will be going to one of these new Sabre-class starships. So obviously the logistics situation is my number one problem. And then my secondary problem is I cannot afford to lose crew like we lost during the Dominion War itself. That is not an acceptable outcome anymore. We cannot ever afford to take losses like that. So I need to protect those assets and those captains and those crews and give them the best and the highest survivability that I can on the most budgetable, complex structure that I'm able to do. So there's things that I have to take into consideration. I want to protect the crew. I want it to be able to defend itself. It's got to be able to travel at warp speed for a decent amount of time. I want it to be faster. Like, this ship can do everything, and it can defend itself. It's got more firepower than even an Excelsior-class starship. It's got better shielding. It can hold its own better. It's more maneuverable. Everything about this ship is better. So with that being said, there are still a lot of Excelsiors out there that are still functional and then were brought back to battle ready standards, right? So what I would do is, why this is taking place, why I'm building Sabres and replacing everything, I would have all supply convoys done by Miranda-class starships would then be reassigned by Excelsior-class starships. I would not get rid of or decommission my Excelsior fleet because the ships are big, they have decent firepower, and I think that they would do good transporting within Federation borders. I would not have Excelsior-class starships going to rim worlds or anything like that where it's expected to be able to protect itself on its own. No, I'd be using this for internal transport only. So from Federation planets, stations, whatever, safety zones basically is where the Excelsior. And the secondary reason for this is the Excelsior has a large cargo space. So it will be an even better supply convoy than the Miranda. So it would kind of look like this. So you have these key planets and structures and stations, and the internal supply system will be the older, outdated Excelsior-class starships. And then anything that's dealing with deep space transport of cargo is going to be the new Sabre-class starships, because that's where you're going to get hit. That's where it's the most dangerous, and we want to have something that can fight or get out of there and be able to take enough of a beating where it can get out safely. You're not going to see that with Mirandas. They don't have enough defenses. And then honestly, the Excelsiors, they don't really have the shielding to withstand a large amount of attack from enemy vessels. They're gonna get damaged, and their warp nacelles are large and easy targets. Like, it's not that hard to cripple an Excelsior-class starship if you really want to, but you're gonna really struggle to do the same thing against a Sabre, because not only is it faster, it's more maneuverable, it's got stronger shields, it has somewhat abrasive armor, but that abrasive armor is around the warp nacelles. So even if you do hit the warp nacelles, most likely it's not going to do a whole lot of damage until you get past that abrasive armor. So it's going to be a really hard thing to stop that ship. And then really thinking about the logistics is mostly about protecting the crew. And you can crew a Sabre for less than you can crew an Excelsior. So why this is taking place, another thing that I would do is I would stop all my capital class starships from going out and doing explorational missions. So like the Enterprise and the Nebulas and the Ambassadors. I would recall them and we would stop all that. And why we're stopping that, what's going to happen is we're going to start building Nova class starships. They're small, they're pretty advanced, and then if we lose one of them, we're not losing 1,000 people, we're losing a few hundred. So the major long-range exploration is going to be done by very advanced, small, well-armed starships, because there, as far as firepower goes, there's not that big of a difference between the two ships. As far as phasers, I know that the torpedoes aboard the Ambassadors and the Galaxies are much better, but for the most part, this ship is it's pretty well armed. I mean, remember the Nova was kind of like a design that was going to be what the Defiant is, but then it just didn't have exactly what they needed, and so then it went to this secondary role. But this is a very advanced ship, and it is expensive, and so I'm not going to lie and say it's not going to take a lot of resources, because this is a lot of advanced technology going into a small ship. But the main reason I'm bringing the big ships back is due to the lack of defensive capabilities the Federation has after the Dominion War. You cannot waste command ships, and so I would bring all those command ships back. And another thing I will just throw out there, if there is an Ambassador that has not been upgraded, I would upgrade the Ambassadors. So these ships are all being brought back. After we're done with the Sabres, we're going to start building these Nova classes for our exploration, and we're bringing home all the Galaxies and Nebulas. All right, and then another project that I'm going to be bringing in after that is I want to make a decent amount of Intrepids. And the reason why I'm picking Intrepid classes is because I want to use them for diplomatic missions. Because we know after all this fighting, all this chaos, we don't want to lose any of our ties or have any internal issues with Starfleet. And we know there's going to be lots of that after the Dominion War. So we need to protect our borders and protect ourselves. And so the best way we can do that is keeping our diplomatic ships going. And the reason I'm picking the Intrepid is mostly because the Intrepid is the fastest ship that they have at this point in time, and it's an incredibly powerful science ship, and it has a lot of defenses, so it can defend those, key ambassadors and things. So now we know we have Sabres for cargo, we're going to use Intrepids for diplomatic missions, and then we're going to use, obviously, the Nova to go exploring strange new worlds. So obviously we need to get our assets so we can start building a military back, right? So that's going to be the next goal. So we've kind of partially done this already by using the Sabres for our supply ships. So if we're in a combat situation, we can pull those reserve cargo ships and things, which are technically my Sabres, and they're going to be a frontline defense for small attack ships, or even to soak up, frontline defense, the maneuverable and things of that nature. Now, I'm going to pick the Akira as my main cruiser. And so what I'm going to do is I'm not going to be focusing and building tons of different kinds of ships. I'm not going to be paying attention to New Orleans or any of these older designs. I will be focusing on proven cruisers. And I think that of all the different steam runners, Norways, and all those things, when it comes to a combat role, as far as what you get for what you pay for, I think the Akira is the best overall. Its ship has got, it's got okay amounts of phasers on it. Its fire arcs are decent. It has a lot of torpedoes, and it can destroy most enemy ships before they even get in range. And now you imagine, if you think about that, you're going to be fighting at warp. You could blow up an enemy fleet. If you had a large fleet of Akiras, you could take out entire fleets or even entire groups of ships before they even get in combat. And when they get in combat, you have partial abrasive armor, you have 6 phasers array that are type 10, and then you have the torpedoes aboard, and it has good shielding, and it has decent hull armor and everything else. It can take a good punishment, like a good beating. And then if I want a ship that's going to be strictly attacking space stations and things of that nature, there's nothing the Federation has that's better than the Sovereign. The Sovereign is an absolute beast. It carries a huge amount of torpedo tubes and phasers, and its shielding is second to none to any ship out there. There's nothing that even compares to the Sovereign. To give you an idea of how much of a difference there is, the Akira and the Galaxy classes have a shield that's around 1,700,000 something, right? The Akira, or the Sovereign, the Sovereign has been seen to have shielding two different kinds. We've seen it around the 4,000 range and then 7,000 during the last movie. So we know that the shielding aboard this thing is 2 to 3 times better than any other starship out there. So just in case anybody's wondering why I'm doing this, well, first off, we need supplies to build the ship. So we need a good infrastructure to bring in parts back and forth to different stations. So we definitely need this to be taken care of. And then we don't want an issue like the border wars to happen because we're neglecting Federation citizens, like what happened with the Cardassians. At this point, we can't afford internal conflicts. That is completely unacceptable. So obviously we need our logistics and we need stability. And once we get those two things, we can then focus on our military, which is going to be, obviously the goal of all these things is to get a strong, well-situated military. So let's just kind of take a look at this new line of warships, what it would do, what it would look like. And this is kind of what it would be, is I would have small squadrons of sabers located in the front of the fleet. And then they're going to be there, they're going to be, shooting down incoming torpedoes, or they're going to be destroying, enemy ships or fighters coming in because they have those powerful sensors. And then, right behind them is going to be the big hitters. We're going to have the Sovereigns. And then located in the middle of the fleet is going to be my big capital ships, the battle cruisers. We're talking about the Galaxy classes. Now, the Galaxy classes are going to be like command ships. That's where the admirals and the people controlling the fleets are, because though these ships are state-of-the-art, in actuality, the communication systems aboard the next generation or the golden era galaxies and nebulas is actually better than the Akiras and the Sabers, because these things are completely built around war and they have a different ideology. So that's why these would be the command ships, because they can still take a beating, they're still tough, but then they can give those commands to the ships. And then the Akiras are going to be in the back, and they're going to be delivering massive torpedo barrages on the enemy fleets. So this is the logistics, this is the idea, and this is why I picked these ships. So imagine a fleet is coming in to engage with, say, I don't know, the Dominion again. So think about how effective torpedo barrages were during the border wars. And then think about, well, what if you're dealing with a superior force? Like you're being outnumbered, 2 to 1 or 3 to 1. Like, what are you going to do? Well, that's a scary thought. But if you have fleet logistics like this, where these Akiras are launching just torpedo wave after torpedo wave, that first 2 fleets that are going to be, engaging you, half of them might get blown up before they ever even get in firing range. And if you're fighting the Dominion, we know the Dominion are not very good at long-range torpedo barrages. The Cardassians don't really have it. The Jem'Hadar ships don't really have it. These are all single-shot torpedo launchers. Let's take advantage of this situation the best that we can. Like, we want to shoot at you as far away as we can, kill as much as we can, and then deal with you to get in. Because what's going to happen is you're just going to blow the crap out of those forces. What's probably going to make it is going to be those more maneuverable Jem'Hadar fighters and things. And then when they get into that first line, what's going to happen? You have a ship that's just as maneuverable as the Jem'Hadar fighter, but far more capable in combat. And then it's able to, track down and fire fight off more than one target at once. Like, if you were to evaluate this fleet would, in my opinion, easily destroy this enemy fleet, which is, significantly larger in numbers, right? But because of our tactics and our fleet composition, we can take, which would probably be a loss for most other races, and make them into an absolute win for us. And we could go with very little casualties even from this battle if we were able to destroy a majority of those ships before they ever got into combat range. So my main reason for not having lots of random ships is because yes, it's nice to have all these different tools to use, but it's problematic in a fleet. When you have a fleet that's a bunch of random different ships with different stats and different weapons, yes, I'm sure Starfleet officers are aware what most ships are like, but when you're in a situation like this, it's a lot easier to be thinking about a couple of different ships that are doing the job that it needs to do rather than trying to remember, 10 to 20 different starships and what their capabilities are, especially when you're in a combat situation when you're under a lot of stress and it's already hard to think about what you're dealing with and what you're doing. You don't want to make mistakes like we did with Sacrifice of Angels, where we're sending in Miranda classes who are getting absolutely obliterated on the front lines and are doing next to nothing, because if a ship gets obliterated, then it's useless and it didn't do anything. It's just, honestly, it's like a lemming. It's just going in there and dying. It's not really a very effective way of using starships. Now, with that being said, this isn't an attack on obviously the Federation, because in their situation, this is all they had left. They were desperate for starships. This is all they could field, and this is the best that they could do. But we're in a better situation where after the war, we know what's going on, and we can better prepare for it. And I think that this would be a great way to prepare for a future conflict with a great power like the Dominion again. Now, there is another thing that I really would want to focus on, is I would put a lot of emphasis on keeping the relationships with the Klingons and the Romulans good, because I know after this, pretty much the Dominion War, the Federation, Klingon, and Romulan alliance completely goes to crap. And I would not have allowed that to happen if I was in charge of Starfleet, especially with the Romulans. I mean, I really think that this is a huge F-up by the Federation. So the Romulans were basically supporting the Federation and the Klingons during the end of the war, because the Klingons were pretty much obliterated. If I remember right, they had like 1,500 ships left in the entire fleet of the Klingon Empire, and the Federation were left with only their basically reserve fleets, and they were in not a very good situation. And then the Romulans basically lost their entire fleet defending the Federation and defending the Klingon Empire. So the Romulans sacrificed a shit ton. I mean, think about the Romulans, the way they are, the way they behave. They don't put their neck out for nobody. And when they were joining the actual war with the Federation, they didn't just go all in. They went all in. They lost everything. So they sacrificed everything. And then what? We see in Picard that they just kind of spit in the Romulans' face. Oh, your planet's not going blah. We don't have time to send ships there. We don't have blah blah. Bullshit. That was just a idiotic, stupid mismatch. Nothing irritates me more than Picard season 1, because that's just so dumb. It doesn't really seem to make a lot of sense to me, but it is canon, and so we have to go with it. I just think that that is the stupidest thing that the Federation had done, is let the relationship with the Romulans, which had been so hard, and they've managed to get them as a part of the alliance, and then they let it to go to crap. Like, how stupid is that? All right, so that's what I would do. Now, the real question is, what would you do? Do you agree with what I said? Do you agree with some of it? Do you think I made a mistake? Would you replace something? I mean, if you had to do this, what would you do? If you could make a comment, I'd really appreciate that. I want to know what your lineup of ships would be. Would you, I don't know, would you decide to go back and build a bunch of Golden Era starships and focus on peace? I mean, I don't know. Would you decide, nah, we're just going to build nothing but fleets of defiance? I mean, whatever. Whatever you thought I should have done, I want to know. And with that being said, I actually made this video a while ago and then screwed it up and deleted it and didn't realize it. Had to completely redo it again, and it should have came out a long time ago, and I just realized I did this, guys, and I said, you know what? This will be a bonus video for Monday for Memorial Day. So you're welcome, folks. Happy Memorial Day. If you like this content, please subscribe and tell your friends. If you're a fan of Star Trek, make a comment. It makes a difference. With that being said, thank you all for watching Trek Wars.